Stephanie Dobson is back with us today. Stephanie is a lawyer and mediator in Lloydminster. We've been talking about issues surrounding separation and divorce now for several months. And Stephanie, today, this is an issue kind of unique to the border city, really, or one of the big things to consider when you are going through a separation or a divorce. And that is what happens when you live on either side, on the Saskatchewan side or the Alberta side. So is there a difference in the procedure you have to go through if you live on either side of the border?
You know, this topic in and of itself is probably about a half an hour worth of an interview. So we're going to try to do some summarization here because it really is a big topic. And in fact, the answer is yes, it really actually does matter whether you're on the Alberta side or on the Saskatchewan side. What I always do at the very beginning, whenever I meet with people, I always tell them, okay, I've got to put on my Saskatchewan brain or my Alberta brain, depending on where they're living. So let's just talk about divorce itself. So divorce itself is federal legislation. So it doesn't matter where you are in Canada, we use the same Divorce Act to deal with divorce-related issues. So things like, you know, the actual divorce itself, spousal support, child support, and you know, parenting-related issues, custody access, excuse me, those sorts of things. The treatment that the Divorce Act gets in each province can vary depending on which, you know, by the courts. So that's kind of where there's the difference. So the legislation is the same, but the underlying how the courts will treat the interpretation of the Divorce Act in each province is just slightly different. However, with division of assets and debts, that is actually provincially based. So there's a completely different regime in each province, and it's all under provincial statute. So for sure, for the division of assets and debts, the province does matter.
Now, what about the scenario whether if you are living together or if you're not living together at the time? So if you're legally married by that, or if you are a common law, does that factor in as well?
So yeah, now, if you're married, just like I said earlier, if you're married, of course, we're going to use that federal legislation. If you're unmarried, there is provincial legislation, which, you know, there's some differences, of course, between the Divorce Act and the provincial legislation, but for things like parenting, child support, spousal support, those things will go based on the provincial legislation if you're not married. For property division, and I always look at this one a little bit separately because it is exclusively provincial jurisdiction for the division of your assets and debts. In Alberta, interestingly, January 1st of 2020, the province of Alberta brought in legislation or changed its legislation to allow a legislated right for unmarried couples who are splitting to divide up their property using the legislation. Before, you had to go through a cumbersome court process, and now it's more through the legislation.
Now, Stephanie, what issues can be created if a family ends up moving post-separation because of whatever the circumstances are going on?
That's an interesting question because sometimes what will happen is you'll have your matrimonial, your family home in one province, and then one person decides to move out and they happen to find a great place that they want, and it's on the other side of the border, whatever the other side means, and it's more of a permanent move or semi-permanent move where you have to change your driver's license over and where your income taxes are filed and that sort of thing. The issues that can be created if you're married and want to get a divorce, although it's federal legislation, each province has its own courtroom or courthouse, I suppose. It's called the Queen's Bench. And that's depending on where you're living, that's the court where you will actually file your documentation to file for divorce. And the rule is that one of the spouses has to be resident in a province for 12 months before that particular court will take jurisdiction to get you divorced. So if one person moves, it's okay as long as the other person stays put. But if both, and I've had it before a few times where both spouses will move provinces and then they can't get divorced at the 1-year mark, they have to wait a year and a half or whatever it is to get that 12 months of living in one province.
When you hire somebody, if somebody is looking to get some help, whether it be preliminary or right through the divorce process, does that matter provincial boundary-wise as well?
If you're hiring a lawyer, we are provincially regulated. In the border city, most of us lawyers are members of both the Law Society of Alberta and Law Society of Saskatchewan. When you get outside of Alberta, it's usual that the lawyer will only be registered in that one particular province, and so you have to be careful if you're looking for a lawyer in Vermilion, but your matter is you live in Battleford, for example. That changing the jurisdictions. A lawyer is able to take a limited number of cases in another province, as long as there's certain rules around it of how much they can take and whether that province will accept a lawyer from another province. For example, I can't practice in the Northwest Territories, but I could practice in British Columbia on a very limited basis. The key, though, is to make sure that your lawyer that you choose is comfortable, even if there's rules to allow it, allow your lawyer to practice in a different jurisdiction. It's important that your lawyer feels comfortable with the provincial laws that are in the jurisdiction of where you live.
All right, Stephanie, well, thank you once again, as usual, for speaking us and enlightening us on so many different issues surrounding divorce and separation. What is the best way for someone to get more information on the services you offer, as well as the Up a Notch Learning, which offers some courses that can help as well? What's the best place to go to start to get all of that information in one spot?
Great. Well, thanks. I put a lot of emphasis on the learning and on education and resources around separation and divorce. So any issues around those topics that you're looking for, you can go to my e-learning community, which is upanotchlearning.com, or you can go to our law firm website, which is henkadivorce.ca. And if you're looking to get more information or to book a consultation for me as a lawyer or mediator, you could also call our office, 780-875-2234.
All right, Stephanie, once again, thank you so much for talking with us today, and stay warm.
Thank you. You too.